6 o'clock on this wonderful Wednesday, March the 12th. Damian Mitchell alongside Conrad Van Order. Welcome into Morning JOX, JOX 94.5. Can't forget about you, our wonderful listeners, 205-834-9450. First off, I got to say happy birthday to my girlfriend, Taylor. Hope you have a wonderful day. She's out of town right now, but hope you have a wonderful day. She just hit the big 3-0. She's a cougar. She likes.
I was about to say, so yeah, you like them older. That's
yeah, you know, your boy got game. You know, you boys shooting from Steph Curry range. Happy birthday, baby girl. And let's have some fun this morning. 205-834-9450. Listen, SEC tournament time is here. Today is the day we get started at noon today. South Carolina taking on Arkansas. We got Texas and Vanderbilt, LSU and Mississippi State. And for the nightcap, the late nightcap, we have Oklahoma and Georgia. Let's just get straight to it, Conrad. Who is going to win the SEC tournament? You got one team. Could be your team. And listen, think with your heart, think with your head. I don't really care. All I'm asking you is on Sunday, who will be cutting down the nets representing the SEC as a lot of the teams already have a bid in the NCAA tournament, but they solidify themselves as the SEC tournament champions. We want to hear from you, 205-834-9450. Your text message, your calls, always welcome here on Morning JOX. Could it be Auburn? Is Auburn, as the number one seed, is it pretty much theirs to lose? Could a Florida mess around and win the SEC tournament? Of course, Alabama, Tennessee, rounding out the top four. Or could it be one of these teams that are playing a little bit early? We talked about some sleepers yesterday. We brought the Missouris of the world, the Kentuckys. Could Mississippi State find some heat starting up today and having a nice little run? Could we see Ole Miss? Could Chris Beard find a way to put it all together? Who knows? But I think that when you look at just how the regular season went in the SEC, who really knows at this point? But I think that what we're going to experience during this SEC tournament, whatever Coach Cal wants to say that Arkansas ain't going to care unless they're playing for a finals, win this one, and then you find a way to win the next one, and you continue on. Yeah, none of the players that are making a trip up to Nashville, Tennessee, think they're going to lose the basketball game. Because if there's any kind of reflection on what we saw in the regular season, again, we've preached it here pretty much game in and game out. If you're not playing your A game, you will get sent to the house. No ands, ifs, or buts about it. But I think that today we kind of, again, South Carolina, for the longest of time, didn't have a conference win. Then they messed around and found a way to get a couple right there on the end. So they're feeling a little confident because they can play spoiler at this time. They're just like, hey, we're not going to NIT or anything. So this is the last meaningful basketball we're going to play. Arkansas, if you're not ready to play, they've already beaten you once. You need to make sure that you go out there and handle your business so you can be on the losing end of things early on in the SEC tournament.
Yeah, let's go back to last year. It wasn't in the SEC, but you had a North Carolina State team that essentially came out of nowhere, and they found themselves in the Final Four, but they went through and won the ACC tournament, got themselves the auto bid, and again, that was a team that didn't have a spectacular season, but when they needed to, they found a way to play their best basketball at the right time, and we saw how far that took them, and so that, I'm not going to sit here and say that, yeah, one of these teams playing tonight is about to go and win the SEC tournament and go on this great Cinderella run. It's absolutely possible, but like you said, just with how up and down the SEC has been this year in the sense that the level of competition has been high all throughout, but you've had, kind of these ebbs and flows for every team. And it looked like, Auburn was going to avoid that. Then they lose their last two games of the year. And so now you're just kind of sitting there like, all right, it looks like this is really anyone's tournament to go out there and win. And I do think, with the way that the season ended, it would be hard for me not to go into the tournament expecting really big things from Auburn, just because of the way that the season ended and knowing, just how Bruce Pearl is and how he's going to look at this as an opportunity as, all right, I know you want some rest, but we've got some things we got to figure out there on the floor. Yep. And, a motivated Auburn team with a chip on their shoulder. They've been the best team in the SEC all year long. It would be really tempting to pick Florida as well, to be honest. That's what I expect to get on Sunday. I think it's going to be Auburn versus Florida again. I hope that I'm wrong. I hope that it's Alabama versus Auburn, and we get IBOB Part 3 in the championship. That would be awesome, but I just think with how good Florida's been playing here as of late, it would be hard not to pick them. And honestly, before the game on Saturday and the way that that game went, I probably would have picked Florida to win the SEC tournament just
Mm-hmm.
because you're like, okay, well, if you're Auburn, do you maybe coast a little bit, or you just don't have that, you know. You don't have the chip on your shoulder that you have now that you've lost back-to-back games. So, but I do think that would be my prediction for the matchup, and I really do believe that you're going to see an Auburn team in Nashville starting on Friday that's highly motivated. They've gotten a chance to rest. Hopefully Denver Jones is good to go. Hopefully Janai Broome continuing to get better. And I know he's, everybody's dinged up at this time of the year. That's just the way that it's going to work. But, those have been, in my opinion, probably the two best teams overall in the SEC this year, at least from a consistency standpoint. And it would be hard to bet against them. And it's hard to bet against a team that, in my opinion, has been the best team in basketball all year long. And
Yep.
now you've got, some extra motivation going into your conference tournament. So on top of the fact that, I think Auburn's going to be fine regardless, but maybe you're a little worried about that number one overall seed now, and you're looking at this as, all right, well, we probably need to go out there and win at least one or two of these games to cement ourselves as the number one overall seed because, I mean, let's be honest, I would imagine Duke is just going to run through the ACC tournament with
Lord.
how lackluster that conference has been this year.
Pitiful.
So if you're Auburn, yeah, you probably do want to go out there and continue to add to your resume, but I mean, it should just be it should be an awesome week of basketball. And I mean, again, just starting today, and just think about how many, because last night, right, you had the Big 12 and ACC that started their conference tournaments, and you're looking at some of these matchups, and you're like Colorado and TCU, or you got like these like a bad Syracuse team out there, and
Mm-hmm.
you're just you're watching these games, and you're like, okay, I mean, whatever. I just wanted something to watch essentially. And, we're getting those games today in the SEC, and Arkansas is going to the tournament. Vanderbilt's going to the tournament. Mississippi State's going to the
Yep.
tournament. Georgia's going. Oklahoma's probably going. Like, you've got 4 games tonight, and every single one of those games is going to feature at least one team we're going to see in the NCAA tournament. And it's the opening round. These are the
Yep.
quote unquote bad teams in the conference. And I think that's what's going to make this tournament so special is, no offense, but outside of LSU and South Carolina, and I mean, Texas is down there too, but Texas has something to play for, right? If they can,
Mm-hmm.
if they find a way to get themselves to Saturday or Sunday, maybe they're in the NCAA tournament. So I think we just don't want to take this for granted because again, there's a lot of conferences out there that have a lot of good basketball, but I mean, it's just wild that you have the first round of a conference tournament and the majority of those teams are already have their ticket punched to the NCAA tournament, and we get to watch that tonight.
Yeah. And I think that's what's so fun about these potential matchups. Like, I know the first round of games that we're getting tonight, throughout the day today, and seeing who they could potentially match up with. Because say Vanderbilt knocks off Texas, they're playing Texas A&M tomorrow. They've already knocked off Texas A&M once this season, so it's okay. Do we get the rematch? Is Texas A&M going to play up to another level? And I think a lot of it going back to who I think could win the SEC tournament, the top 4 seeds. This rest is probably the most important thing that they have kind of solidified themselves. They handled their business in the regular season in order to find themselves as one of these top 4 seeds that get the double bye. And I think the rest is imperative. When you look at Auburn, Denver Jones wasn't 100% pretty much the last entire week of the season. And now you get some extra time to kind of build things up. Janai Broome, we're going through a little bit of a slump. He kind of got out of it against Alabama, but now you're even closer to 100% than you were when you had, just a couple days of rest in between. Now you've had, pretty much essentially a week of rest before you're stepping back out there on the court. Tennessee, how much momentum are they really riding into, the conference tournament? I think for Tennessee and kind of Florida too, I look in this where I think they would have benefited a little bit more had they had just a couple days rest. Like the momentum they were building there towards the end of the season, I think it could come into question like, man, maybe we just didn't need this much rest. Maybe we just could have kept the momentum going because of how we were playing. And I think for Alabama, just wrapping up the season, it's all right. We use that Auburn game as the new barometer of what to expect from this point forward. When you look at just pretty much every game from this point forward, it's survive and advance. That's all it is. You find a way to win a ball game. It doesn't matter what the final score looks like, as long as you have one more point than the other team. So be it. It doesn't have to be the prettiest game. I mean, if you're Grant Nelson, think about how impactful. I mean, one, your confidence is after what you did to the number one team in the nation on the road and then leading right into the SEC tournament. Like, I think that a lot of these storylines that we see from a lot of these teams and a lot of these games moving forward kind of set the precedent of what could be an exciting NCAA tournament along with the SEC tournament. I'm kind of with you as far as who do I expect to be in the final. I think it's hard. It's hard for me now because I've just seen it. I don't want to be a prisoner of the moment. But if Alabama is clicking like they're supposed to, especially after what we just witnessed Saturday against Auburn, it's hard not to put them in the final as well, because we're starting again. It could just be a one game thing that they were just hyped up against Auburn, but Grant Nelson performs. You're seeing LeBron Fallon get his, do his thing. I mean, Cliff Amore, he's starting to elevate where he needs to be as far as playing. And then Mark Sears, even with him only having 9 points, everybody else stepped up. And that's something that we had seen for Auburn pretty much once we flipped the calendar to 2025, that's what we saw from Auburn. It's, okay, we know Janai Broome is the best player on the floor, but everybody else's game is starting to pick up. So I'm interested to see just where a lot of people feel, or how a lot of people feel. I mean, even if you are an Alabama fan, you're an Auburn fan, do you still feel like your team can win or is going to win the SEC tournament? I'm just kind of, I like this part of the schedule because you're getting them back to back to back. There's no like, oh, we got a couple days of practice. No, it's you win, the next day you're playing again. And I think the grind of just finding that extra layer, that extra gear to finish through. And if you're Auburn, you've handled your business in regular season, so you get that double bye. It's okay, back to back to back. You have an entire weekend block kind of scheduled of, we need to go out here and handle our business if we want to advance and keep going forward.
Yeah, no, I mean, you're absolutely right. And you just look at some of the games that, you could potentially get, I mean, starting tomorrow, but really, I mean, Friday, Saturday, and then, of course, the championship on Sunday. But, I mean, you could be looking at, I mean, we could have Auburn versus Tennessee and Alabama versus Florida back-to-back on Saturday. It's hard to imagine better basketball games than that. And, I mean, even tomorrow, right, you're going to get Kentucky and Alabama, or on Friday, you're going to get Kentucky and Alabama potentially. Florida and Missouri, a game that Missouri, knocked off Florida earlier this year. You're going to get A&M and Tennessee potentially, or even maybe a Vanderbilt and Tennessee rematch, because that's, they split that series in the regular season, so that can be a tiebreaker for them. And just, you are going to get very, very, very high quality basketball over the next handful of days. And it's the perfect way to put a cap on what has been just such a good season for the SEC of, all right, let's watch all these teams do it one more time and then go to the NCAA tournament. And hopefully, based on what we've seen throughout the year, they're going to go to the NCAA tournament and start eviscerating some people.
Yep.
And this is just kind of our last chance to, all right, let's go beat up on each other one more time. And then, we're going to go where we go in the NCAA tournament, handle our business, and then we'll see, if and when we get SEC on SEC matchups. And I think that's another interesting part of this is just, how, when you get the NCAA tournament field on Sunday and we're looking through the brackets, it almost feels like for a lot of these teams, you're going to be looking at, oh man, all right, when would they potentially have to play another SEC team in the NCAA tournament? And if they're playing somebody else, you're probably like, man, okay, I feel pretty good about that matchup.
Yep.
But then if they start getting back into SEC on SEC playing in the NCAA tournament, that's when you're going to be like, ooh, okay, I don't know how I feel about that. I heard, I forgot what it was, but I was listening to somebody yesterday and they were talking about Georgia, for example. And they were like, man, I'll be honest, if I'm Georgia, do you just kind of lose this game against Vanderbilt? Because based on where you're currently projected to be seeded, you wouldn't be playing a 1 seed in the second round of the tournament. But if Georgia goes into Nashville and wins a couple of games, they might find themselves on the 8 or 9 seed line. And at that point, you're playing a number 1 seed in the round of 32. And is that the kind of matchup you want? Or do you just want to, hey, let's just sit back here a little bit. Let's go, play a 3 seed or a 2 seed in the second round of the tournament. And, we're going to feel a lot better about that matchup against a team like a St. John's, for example, which is a team that Georgia beat in non-conference this year. And so
Mm-hmm.
you look at those kinds of things and just, again, these are not the way that coaches and players think, right? Because they're going out there every time they play to win a basketball game. But just, I guess that kind of element gets added to it as well, where there starts to be some long-term strategy, I think, on the sides of some of these teams when it gets to conference tournament time. And I think it's going to be awesome. And the fact that it gets started today, I know it's going to be great. We'll have coverage for you on three-man front as games are going to get going here around lunchtime today. And um, yeah, it's finally here. I'm glad, the last couple of days have been fine. We were talking about it, and we can talk about it, on the other side of the break, but watching stuff like St. Mary's and Gonzaga last night, like, hey, shout out to Gonzaga. Congrats on the WCC conference tournament win. But it's just a little different than what we've been watching in conference play here for the last few months. And you're
1000%.
just sitting there like, kind of want to claw my eyeballs out watching this game.
It was an absolute rock fight. And yeah, man, it's when you look outside the SEC, it's a tough watch.
It's like, man, I'm really excited for South Carolina, Arkansas after watching.
Yeah, right. Like can we hurry up and get to some real basketball on our front? Because I think for the SEC, we were kind of spoiled. If you watch some of these teams, and it's not like the upper echelon of basketball teams. It's kind of the bottom tier of a lot of these conferences opening rounds, and you can tell like there's a big gap. And also, I saw a stat too. North Carolina is 1-11 in quad one opponents.
They are
quad one opponents.
Yeah.
Like I never thought we'd be having that conversation about North Carolina.
Oh yeah, that's why everyone couldn't understand why, because there was a period where them and Georgia were the last or the first four out, I guess, and North Carolina was slotted ahead of them, and everybody went and looked, said, all right, so I mean, not saying Georgia's, one of the best teams in the country necessarily, but in terms of if we're comparing them to North Carolina, they were, like a dozen spots higher in the net rankings. They had 3 or 4 quad one wins to North Carolina's 1, and everyone's just sitting there going, so if it wasn't for the name on the jersey, like we're not having this conversation, right? Like, let's be honest with ourselves. Yeah, it hasn't been great. And that's the thing for Duke. I'm very interested in Duke. I know a lot of people are really, really high on them. I mean, Duke's played like 4 ranked teams all year long. They haven't played a ranked opponent in ACC play, if I'm not mistaken, because Clemson wasn't ranked when they played them, and they lost that game. And, you just sit there and you look at some of those matchups and you're like, I don't have the same concerns about these top tier teams in the SEC unless they have to play each other in the tournament. But when you get to the teams like Duke, that you're like, all right, I get it. You're really good. You have one of the best players in the country. You've had a fantastic season, but it's like, man, at some point you need to play somebody, right?
Absolutely. 205-834-9450. Question is simple. Who is winning the SEC tournament? You let us know. Your text messages, your calls, always welcome here on Morning JOX. 205-834-9450. We'll keep the conversation going on the other side. Keep it locked right here on JOX 94.5. Who is this?
Arctic Monkeys.
Okay, I got you. You play something. You used to play something by them before.
Mm-hmm.
Hadn't seen the tape. Hadn't heard the tape on this one, but nice vibe though. I like the vibe.
Worth checking out. Worth a listen.
I got you. Welcome back into Morning JOX. JOX 94.5. Damian Mitchell, Conrad Van Order, and you as well. 205-834-9450. It's simple. It's got a simple question for today. Who is winning the SEC tournament? Got 16 teams. Thank you, Texas and Oklahoma. So that means we start a day early. Usually start on Thursdays and see how it goes. But now we're starting up on Wednesday with the first game today on the SEC network coming up at noon. So while you're listening to Three-Man Front, you'll have it on your television screens. You got South Carolina as a 16 seed taking on Arkansas. And then game 2 will be between the 13th seeded Texas Longhorns taking on Vanderbilt Commodores. And then game 3, we have LSU as the 15 seed taking on Mississippi State as the 10. And the nightcap, we have the 11 seeded Georgia Bulldogs and the 14th seed Oklahoma Sooners. So it should be a fun ride. Been getting some reaction here on the JOX text line and the phone lines. You know they are open, 205-834-9450. Tim from Coleman says he has Alabama beats Auburn in the SEC championship. Then they both go on to the finals of the NCAA tournament and play the most epic game in the history of college basketball. Roll, Tide, roll. I'm telling you right now, I would love to see it. 1,000%.
Oh, I would. Yeah, there's nothing I want more than that right now.
And Drake, he texted in, not the one from Canada, but the Florida Gator fan. He says, guys, you know who I'm rolling with. Go Gators.
I'd be feeling pretty good right now if I was a Florida fan.
Mm-hmm. Joseph texts in. He says, I'd love to see Georgia win it, but I'm going with Florida. Okay. Believe.
That'd be big time if Georgia won it. That'd be an upset.
Somebody said Roll Tide will win, but Dylan Carwell is the best defender.
Okay. I mean, he's a very good defender.
Yeah. Okay.
It's just a random note to add in there, but yeah, he's good.
Wesley from Jemison, he says Auburn will take home back-to-back SEC tournament championships. Denver Jones being back and the rest of the roster getting healthy will be the key to cutting down the nets in Nashville again. Love the show. War Eagle.
See, I would love to know, if Auburn fans, has your opinion changed on the SEC tournament in the last week? Just in the sense of, I mean, I'm sure you always wanted to go and win the tournament, right? Everybody wants to win it. But just in the sense of the way that, the last couple of games went for you, has that kind of changed the opinion from, I'm not really that worried about it. Let's just get to the NCAA tournament. Whatever happens in Nashville is not a big deal. Do you still have that mindset? Maybe you never had that mindset, but I'm just curious if a lot of them have changed their mind and now it's like, all right, we got a little something to prove here. Let's go handle our business in Nashville.
Chris G, he takes in and says Auburn takes it all. War damn Eagle. Fanboy takes in and says Alabama wins it all, but they beat Ole Miss on Sunday.
Whew. Okay.
All right. That means Ole Miss has pulled off some upsets along
I was
the
about
way.
to say,
Okay.
I guess they're beating Auburn.
Okay. And Freeman takes in and says they ain't wearing crimson. Still gonna find. I don't know what Malachi Moore said after that though.
Yeah, and I guess we'll never know now that he's going off to the NFL. It'll remain a mystery.
If they ain't wearing crimson,
remain a mystery forever. I will say, you brought it up earlier on, but if Grant Nelson plays, like if that was his wake up call on Saturday against Auburn, yeah, I think Alabama absolutely has as good a chance as anybody. I mean, they have a good chance as anybody to win it. They're one of the best teams, no doubt about it. But that's that's kind of the missing sauce right there, right? If Grant Nelson continues to play at that kind of a level here in the postseason, yeah, I think the expectations for Alabama, I think, become a little bit different because if that guy's going just like we saw last year, I think the pieces around him are better than what you had last year. There's absolutely no reason you shouldn't be right back there in the Final Four.
Absolutely. Let's go to the phone lines, 205-834-9450. Our buddy Edward wants to talk some SEC tournament today. What's going on, Edward?
Morning, guys. I think this is a perfect storm for Alabama. They are ranked number 5. Florida's ahead. I think they're going to beat Florida. They go to the final of Auburn, and they're going to win, and they're going to be the number 1 seed in the NCAA.
Okay. Okay, we appreciate you, Edward. We appreciate that. I'm telling you, man, like you said, if all the pieces around Mark Sears and NATO's kind of gets in his bag a little bit, let those boys play. The biggest thing for Alabama, they got to make their shots. And I think it's kind of a recurring thing that we've always discussed. We've always discussed with Alabama. It's avoiding those runs or trying to minimize you can't start off, down 9-3. You can't be down 12-4 to start the game, because at that point you're pressing. And I think for the Grant Nelsons of the world and the Mo Diabates, the Chris Youngbloods, like this is his first SEC tournament. Now's where you start to make a name for yourself, because we've seen Chris Youngblood when he's playing Mississippi State, and it's like, oh, you could potentially be, you could be Robin to Mark Sears Batman. Like it could work. And now you have Aiden Holloway coming off the bench. And I think that a lot of the depth pieces around Mark Sears and what he needs to be during the month of March, because we saw it last year. We saw like, okay, Mark Sears put this entire team on his back. He needs some help. And that's when you got the Grant Nelson game against North Carolina and things like that. So I think that in the SEC tournament, if anything that we saw against Auburn on Saturday rolls over, it's hard not to see that Alabama could find themselves in the final. And I think that it could be a real possibility. It's just, okay, you're going to have that rematch against Florida, potentially if Florida wins and handles their business. And it's going to, it has to roll over. It's one of those things. You can't just have, a good Friday and then all of a sudden Saturday you look like the Alabamas of old. It's the consistency that you need in a tournament like this, because you can't just, you have to wake up and be ready to play. It's not oh man, we got a couple days of practice. It's, nah, big dog, you waking up after beating, Kentucky, you waking up and playing Florida the next day. So you got to have your mind right.
Yeah, and I think that's, one of the benefits of how competitive the league's been this year, and, even going back and what Auburn, Alabama, and some of these other teams did in the non-conference, and we're used to that here with the teams in our state, is, you're building it up to where, you played such a high level of competition all throughout the year. There's no shell shock that's going to happen in the postseason where you feel like you're in a situation or you're in an environment that you haven't been in before, right? When it comes to some of these bigger games. And, and I think that trickles down to a lot of the younger guys too, of, you could see where, if you're a freshman or somebody like a Phylon, for example, right? Nobody would blame you if you get into a moment. It's like, man, the lights are just kind of bright for him on that day, right? He's a young kid going up in these big environments. But now that you have a whole season under your belt, it's kind of a cliche thing. And we talk about it in football too. But, when you get to this point, it's like those freshmen aren't really freshmen anymore, right? Like they played 30 basketball games now. They have essentially an entire year of experience under their belt. And, those are the guys that you're going to need to be able to rely on, the guys that you're going to need to be able to step up, because as we know, kind of the formula for a lot of these tournament teams here is you want to have a lot of veteran guys and you want to pair them with some talented freshmen who mentally, if they have, if they're, right going into a game, that's how things are going to work, because you have guys that know what it's like to be in crunch time and situations, guys that have a high basketball IQ. They're not going to turn the ball over. They're not going to make, have poor shot selection. And you pair that with some of these younger guys that add that juice, add that spark. Maybe things get out of control a little bit from time to time, but as you see those guys continue to grow, I think Phylon's going to play a huge role for Alabama. I think Pettiford's going to play a huge role for Auburn. And, that's the way that those teams are designed, right? If they're going to reach their full potential and meet their expectations for the year, those guys are going to have to step up. And I think that's what, for the SEC, that's part of what's going to make them so dangerous as a whole. Just all the teams that get into the NCAA tournament is because they're so battle tested going into it. And we've seen how important that can be. And it kind of goes back to, what I was mentioning about Duke earlier, where it's, all right, you're a really good team. You've beaten all of the competition that's in front of you. And I know, you're Duke basketball, right? That comes with a level of pedigree, but you also get to a point where you're like, man, all right, you haven't really had to sweat in quite some time. And I know that, they beat Auburn in non-conference. They had some good wins in non-conference, but you just, give me the SEC and these teams that have been beaten up and battered for the last, 2.5 months, that are now going into the NCAA tournament and getting a little bit of a breather. I did also, I thought this was a cool stat, talking about some of the younger guys. So this is LeBaron Philon, and it's his first 12 SEC games versus the last 6 SEC games. So through the first 12 games, he was averaging about 22 minutes a game, 2.9 assists, 8 points a game. He was shooting 33% from the floor and 30% from three. Those are, freshman numbers, right? You look at that and you're like, okay, yeah, it took a while for somebody like that to find their footing. And then you look at the last 6 games. All right, he's now playing 28, almost 29 points or minutes a game. And you remember that's kind of when they had that shift of having him and Sears on the floor a lot together and allowing Sears to play off the ball more. All right, so he's playing almost 29 minutes a game. His assists are up to 3.8 per game. He's up to 13 points a game. He's shooting 50%
Boom.
from the floor now and 39% from three. And that's the kind of stuff that you look at and you just go, all right, you give these guys some time and they find their footing, and now you're not really playing like a freshman anymore.
Yep.
And we saw that from Pettiford as well, with him and Philon going at it on Saturday. Pettiford was incredible in that game, right? And, I brought it up on Monday. You have 2 of the best teams in college basketball that have, Janai Broome and Mark Sears and Chaney Johnson and Dylan Cardwell and Grant Nelson and Cliff Amore and all these guys that have played a lot of basketball. And in some of the crunch time moments in that game, you had 2 freshmen going at it. And that just shows you, obviously, how talented they are. But, that's such a cool thing. And it shows you how much faith Bruce Pearl and Nate Oates have in these guys and how far they've come over the course of the season. And I think that's, those are guys that can pay big dividends for you come SEC tournament time. And I mean, you just look at, the SEC freshman list that came out. We were talking about yesterday, and you're like, oh, first round pick. Like, there's just so many guys that, don't play like freshmen in this league. And we're about to get to watch a lot of them starting today.
Absolutely. March is the time to make your name for yourself. It is indeed. 205-834-9450. See your text messages, your calls coming in. Who is winning the SEC tournament? We've gotten some Alabama. We've gotten some Auburn. We've gotten some Florida. And we're actually seeing some other names start to appear in the Jocks text line. We'll continue on the other side. Keep it locked right here on Morning Jocks and Jocks 94.5.
6:40. Welcome back into Morning JOX here on JOX 94.5. Conrad and Damian with you here for a few more moments as we continue to get you set for the SEC basketball tournament getting underway today. Alabama and Auburn don't take the court until Friday up in Nashville, but things get underway for you today with 4 matchups here in the SEC tournament. Quickly, I did want to give a quick shout out. We had Alabama and UAB baseball last night at Regions Field. It was beautiful weather out there. It looked like there was a really nice crowd that went out and supported. It was a really good game. Tied at 3 going into the top of the 9th. Alabama adds on a couple of home runs there in the top of the 9th to get the win 6-3. So shout out to Alabama. They are now 17-1 on the season as they knock off the UAB Blazers after visiting Birmingham last night and playing that game at Regions Field. So just quickly recap, if you're tuning in, we've been talking about the SEC tournament. This is your schedule for today. We get things rolling at lunchtime. So, of course, if you listen to 3-Man Front, we will have wall-to-wall coverage for you of the SEC tournament. We'll be giving you live scoring updates during the show as well there. But you are getting things started off. South Carolina and Arkansas. That game is going to tip off at 12 o'clock for you on the SEC Network. All these games today on the SEC Network. After that, expected to start around 2:30, you're going to get Texas and Vanderbilt. Then after that, around 6, you're going to have LSU and Mississippi State. And the nightcap, Oklahoma versus Georgia. That game expected to tip at 8:30. And just remember, with these schedules, they say they're going to start 30 minutes after the first game ends or the game prior ends. And as we know, I'll just put it like this. I don't think that Oklahoma and Georgia game is tipping off at 8:30. I hope that I'm wrong because I really don't want to be staying up until midnight watching basketball because we got to get up pretty early. But if that's what we have to do, that's what we have to do. But just be prepared.
Yeah.
You might want to put a pot of coffee on or something tonight and
fight through it.
Yeah.
It should be fun nonetheless. But like Conrad said, it's usually that's why they say approximately.
The times are deceiving.
They are.
They look nice, but they're not realistic most of the time.
Yeah, he says 8:30, but you may see a tip off at 8:54 somewhere around there. But hey,
9:15.
Yeah. So just take it with a grain of salt. You never know. But we are asking, who is going to win the SEC tournament? 205-834-9450. You can text, you can call in here on Morning JOX. Somebody texts in and says Kentucky is going to win. They have the most to prove. It says Florida's playing the best right now. I think one of these two teams will take it, but I would rather it be Tennessee.
Okay.
Yeah, it's so you think Kentucky wins? You'd rather it be Tennessee.
Wait, who did they say has the most to prove?
Florida. Kentucky.
Okay. Because I thought they'd said Florida had the most to prove, and I was like, I feel like that applies more to Kentucky than. It's like I don't think Florida really has anything to prove.
Me either. I'm with you. Somebody texted in and said, would the SEC have a come apart if Texas and Oklahoma made it to the final?
I mean, not really, just because, at that point, I'd be kind of happy because it'd be like, man, all right, we're getting 14 teams in the tournament, potentially, instead of the 13 that we think we're getting right now. So, if that's the way that it goes.
Somebody says that Bama's going to stall out and Auburn wins it all. War Damn Eagle.
Okay.
John takes in. He says, if you are Auburn, you've already split with Alabama. Don't you want Florida in the final for some get back? Get back.
You don't want the tiebreaker against Alabama?
Right. I think that would, well, I don't know. Auburn fans out here congratulating Alabama fans for wins and victories. I think that, they want to keep the sportsmanship. They want to keep the sportsmanship high. Not the rivalry, the sportsmanship. So understand. Richard from Hoover takes in. He says, I hate them, but everybody better watch out for Tennessee this weekend. A little sneaky.
We'll see. This is just always the time of year with Tennessee. I just kind of hold my breath, and maybe this is the year, but haven't ever seen it with my own eyes. That doesn't mean they can't win the SEC tournament. I guess I'm talking more NCAA tournament, but this is the time of year things get tough for them typically.
Jamie takes in and says, I know Conrad is picking the barn, but I say roll damn Tide. Dang, Conrad. You a big Auburn guy?
No, they've been the best team and they have a chip on their shoulder. So
interesting.
I took the easy way out with my pick.
Somebody texts in and says, if LSU gets hot and the rest of the teams don't show up, then look out.
Yeah, I mean, literally, if they don't show up, yeah.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, like, if
if they don't show
if
up.
yeah, they forfeit the games, yeah, sure, I could see LSU. I like the optimism, but I don't share it with you.
Hey, somebody said watch out for the hometown team in Vandy to make a run.
Yeah, I think Vandy's good, and we've seen them beat some of the better teams in the league, whether it's, we've seen them beat Texas A&M, we've seen them beat Tennessee.
Yeah. Yeah, they're going to have some home cooking. Other Jamie texted in. He says, I think the winner of Bama, Florida wins the entire tournament.
Yeah, I think that's I like that.
Yeah.
I think that would be. I really hope we get another Alabama and Florida game, because clearly, revenge would be nice for Alabama, and that would do a lot of wonders for them in terms of trying to get back onto the 1 seed line. But I just, I want to see that game again with an Alabama team that actually looks like they're, going to give maximum effort. Because that was the frustrating part about that game, right? Is I do think the final score is a little deceiving. I don't think it was quite as close as it ended up being with all the free throws at the end of that one. But, is that the game where, Alabama, kind of looked in the mirror and said, that effort's not going to get the job done. And
Yep.
you saw a different, you definitely saw a different effort on Saturday against Auburn. And yeah, I definitely think Alabama would like another chance at Florida. But man, Florida's just, they're so good. And I mean, Alabama's so good too, but it's just Florida is playing really, really, really good basketball.
Yep.
Like in terms of, because I clearly, I think Alabama, Auburn, and Florida have separated themselves. And we've talked about that throughout the year. I know Tennessee's kind of creeped up there at times, but I think those are definitely the three best teams, and Alabama has the momentum from the Auburn win. Auburn's reeling a little bit after back-to-back losses, but Florida, man, I mean, they're riding high right now. But I mean, you brought it up earlier in the show. Is it a situation where you're like, man, I almost wish we didn't have this time off just because of all the momentum we have? You don't want that to stall.
Yeah, I do agree. 205-834-9450. You continue with your text messages, your calls on who is winning the SEC tournament, and we'll give you our picks as well on the other side. Keep it locked right here on Morning JOX and JOX 94.5. 6:51 here on Morning JOX, JOX 94.5. Damian Mitchell, Conrad Van Order here with you for a few more moments as we get you set for McElroy and Kublik in the morning, coming up at 7 a.m. Then at 10 o'clock, three-man front follows them. And, of course, at 2 p.m., the one and only Paul Feinbaum, the Paul Feinbaum Show. He wraps it up here on JOX 94.5, getting some reaction to who is winning the SEC tournament. Your text messages, your calls, always welcome here on Morning JOX. Steven takes in, he says, just be different. I'm going to say the underdog wins the tournament. But which underdog? So I'm assuming just somebody outside of the top four seeds. Kentucky, Missouri, Ole Miss. We got somebody that said Ole Miss is going to win the tournament, so who knows? Who knows?
Somebody saying if LSU gets hot, they're going
to. Right. Now, that's the most under of underdogs right there. Somebody texts in and says, Alabama has no chance against Florida. Too tall and quick. It's Duke, Florida, and everybody else just hoping they have off games. Okay.
See, again, I just go back to that Florida game, and you're like, man, okay, if you give a little more effort, you get some of those 50-50 balls to go your way. I mean,
yeah. Who knows?
It wasn't like they did to Alabama what they did to Tennessee or what Tennessee did to them in return.
Yeah. Thomas texts in, says, Conrad sure hates him from Tennessee. Vols beat Bama, split with Florida, and lost by 3 at Auburn. How are they not one of the best teams in the SEC?
They are, but I think they're the fourth team, and I think they're clearly the fourth best team in the SEC, and do something in March first. That's always my reservation with Tennessee. Tennessee has good teams, but
underperform.
You disappoint every single year in the NCAA tournament.
Underperform. Bowen Hale will text in. He says, who's older, Zakai Ziegler and Chad Baker-Mazara? Zakai Ziegler, I think, is an actual senior. Like, I think he's just 20. I think he's 22. Chad Baker-Mazara is for sure 25. He's the grown man.
Zakai Ziegler is, yep, you're right. He's 22.
Yeah. I just feel he just feels like he's been at Tennessee for forever.
He does feel like he's been there for a long time.
All right, let's go to the phone lines. Let's go to Dave in Hoover before we get up out of here. What's going on this morning, Dave?
Hey, guys. Yeah, I'm a little concerned with Alabama and Auburn both. You know, if you told me that I would get the Grant Nelson at the end of the year last year that was such a dominant guy, and then last game, I mean, he was like a man possessed. It's like, give me that guy. I think Alabama will be fine. But they do have a tendency of being consistent. And then on the Auburn side, Bruce Pearl's been so concerned with having the most SEC wins, most wins. They look tired to me. I don't think Janai Broom's 100%. I think that ankle's still bothering him. But I don't think it'd necessarily be a bad thing to see both of those teams get bounced early in the SEC tournament so they can rest up and make a run in the NCAA tournament.
Okay. Hey, we appreciate you, Dave. Yeah, I think those are fair. Those are worries that I would have if I was both Alabama and Auburn. But I think that, again, I think they're peaking at the right time. But I think Florida takes the SEC title. I think they go up to Nashville and win. I think they squeak by Auburn in the final game on Sunday.
I think, yeah, and I think, I mean, again, like I think it was Jamie that texted in, whoever wins between Florida and Alabama, I think they're going to have a very good chance. And if Auburn makes it there, that's going to be an excellent matchup. Again, I'm just riding with Auburn because you've gotten a week of rest. You've got a chip on your shoulder. You feel like you have something to actually prove in the tournament now. But, I agree with Dave in the standpoint of, for me with Alabama, I'm not going to sweat it if Alabama gets knocked out on Friday or Saturday because, a couple days rest for the NCAA tournament. You have bigger fish to fry for some of these schools.
Absolutely. It's going to get started today at 12. Arkansas and South Carolina. Mac and Cuber next.